We are live,
We are live,
as in recording.
as in recording.
Oh, okay, I'm a little tired because we just had one of my lessons.
I know. Well, this. Hopefully, this won't be too much of a problem. But I think we'll manage it because we always talk about these issues. Always, whether we're live, whether we're on radio, clean feed, whether we're on camera, we always talk about these issues. So we can do this. Now, what is the topic today? Today is episode 6. Annabelle.
Okay, well, we'll get to the topic in a second. The point is, so I just had a lesson, right? And you're my teacher. I just needed you to know that in my practice this week, I have done my 1 hour of scales. I did my 1 hour of studies. I did my 1 hour of bark. I've done over 10,000 hours, so I think I can quit now. I think that's worked. I think I'm now ready to take on, the professional world. I think I'm now mastered the violin, because everyone tells you have to do all those things every day, and then you get good.
Okay, so the myth here is there's a certain prescription, and if everyone follows that, they will get good, right?
So, students, you are practicing all wrong.
Students, you are practicing all wrong.
That's it.
All right.
So, it is, some people I think still believe that the 10,000 hours myth, the 10,000 hours theory is true, and I think it has been very much, it has been debunked.
I see. I didn't know it had been debunked, and you said, oh, well, everyone knows it's been debunked. But actually, first of all, who debunked it, or how do you know that that's not true anymore? Because I have a feeling it's not true, but how do you know?
I'll link some articles.
Okay, great. I'll
link some articles because I don't want to get so much into that, but it's more
sure.
that there's definitely a perception shift in people nowadays that it's not how long you practice, even not what you practice, but how you practice.
Yeah, good point. I would agree with that.
So our lovely friends at Two Set joke about 40 hours a day. And I know that's a joke, but they have really sparked this. It's this combination of their 40 hours a day. Hilary Hahn did the hashtag 100 days of practice. Both, I know the 40 hours thing is a joke, but it means well as far as, yes, practice. And Hilary Hahn's thing was watch me practice for 100 days, and she did different things. And there was some good stuff that came out of that. But that plus social media, and I'm talking Instagram, has absolutely sparked this wave of I'm going to record my practice and put it out there on social media. Not a bad thing as far as to recording practice. There's so many accounts and kids breaking down what I'm working on and why I'm working on it. And it's all entertaining. It's all really great. But sometimes I come across people that I'm just looking at what they're sort of blogging about, and I just thought, you're doing it wrong. If you feel that you need to break down your practice in saying, guys, I did 7 hours today. 1 hour of that was scales. 1.5 hours were these studies. Of those studies, only Paganini. I did, 2 concertos today. I worked on some solo bark, and I did some excerpts. Already far too long, far too much. I guarantee you only some of that was productive.
Yeah, right. Good. So do you think we can do a combination of 7 hours? If we did 7 hours of amazing practice, imagine what would happen. So what does amazing practice look like? Oh, wait. Okay. First, what does not amazing practice look like, in your opinion? Practice that means you're not getting better, you're getting worse, you're more anxious, it's stressing you out, your body's getting tense.
I'll summarize it. I'll summarize it because I personally went through this, right?
Yep.
When you're focusing more on the page than your body.
Great.
That's it summarized. So I have done the Go Through the Shradiak book, which I love, and I've done it properly, but I didn't at the start.
Yeah.
I was going, okay, great, I've done this page, I've got, black fingers now from the fingerboard and the strings and stuff, but then it came time to progress from that, and that's just wasted time because I wasn't thinking, is my elbow towards my body, is there freedom in my left hand, am I really relaxed in my shoulders and my arm to be able to get the dexterity that you're trying to gain from doing Shradiak.
Now, was that my fault that you did Shradiak?
Probably a mix of, not joking, probably a mix of both. You've recommended it to me before, but I've done it before I was learning from you.
Because I recommend it for a really specific reason. I basically if a student has any tension whatsoever, I don't let them play the ones that focus on the fourth finger, because it ends up being like RSI. It really damages.
And I got RSI. I from a couple of years ago, I was doing all this. I was doing multiple ensembles and orchestras and solo music and every kind of tech work you can think. And sure enough, doing way too much and not properly, I got RSI.
Yeah. And yeah.
And the little, like, one of the second pages of that Stradioak book is separating the tendons between the second and fourth finger.
Yeah.
If you are not doing that properly, you don't have a hope.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And you can't do that metronomically either. So this skips back just briefly to the metronome episode, where if you're not loose and you got that metronome on and you're doing semiquavers, you are just basically compounding any tension that you have. You are making yourself turn into a rock. And then your brain really suffers from that, because there's no freedom, there's no happiness, there's no joy, there's nothing. You can never smile. You're frowning the whole time because you're in pain. So, yeah, okay. So the first thing you said was page. You're focusing on the page instead of the body. So can I just point out that the best success I've ever had in learning something from scratch in the proper way that we're talking about is that I try and grab one bar and memorize it as quickly as possible and turn away from the page.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you as well?
Yeah, that's what I do. Not all the time. So I do that. And I've been recommended to do that from other teachers, so not just yourself.
Yeah. So what does that mean? That means you're not, your brain is not just reading, because apparently reading and listening are two things that the brain can't do simultaneously. Now, I'll try and find an article about that. I did read that once in an article, so I'm sorry, I'm not a scientist, but I have heard that the brain can alternate quickly between listening and reading.
Yeah, I read somewhere that basically multitasking is a myth. And I'm trying to think right now, not a myth, it was just but we can't do it. We think of one thing only
at a time. We can only think of one thing at a time. So the social media problem that we have is that our focus is being pulled multiple times a second. We're clicking on different things, we're getting distracted, and it leads to more anxiety as well. So when we read the music, we can't listen. So we spend a lot of time learning notes by just simply reading the music, and we're not able to fully listen to what that sounds like. So that's why I'm saying, as soon as you start a piece from scratch, grab the first bar, learn it, turn away and see how that bar sounds in the most beautiful way you can make it with the most relaxed body. And then you're set. You've done it. You've memorized a beautiful bar that sounds great in the room. You're listening to it. Then turn back to the page. I know it does sound a bit ADHD, but at least you're getting some of that listening in from the beginning instead of...
And you're starting to learn from memory the second you start to learn the piece. You don't learn the piece and then go back, now I need to learn it from memory. You're saving time as well.
Yeah, that's right. And great. So that's set. What else can we say about the way people practice now, which maybe isn't getting them the results that they want?
Well, I kind of have this grievance that we are looking at the soloists and the sort of the real dominant names in violin, both from teacher and soloists from the 20th century, and thinking how they did it, therefore we must be able to do it, and we will end up like mastering the violin, so to speak. And there are some people that from the day they pick up the violin can follow these methods of learning and achieve an incredible technique and maybe become a soloist or a professional, so to speak. But then there's a lot of people that can't it's not going to work for them, but we have a mindset that that's what we must be able to do.
Okay, this is great, because what this means, what you've just described, I think, is the difference between a kid who learns early and who learns this particular prescribed way by their teacher, who may be a bit old-fashioned, whatever, but it all goes in quite nicely. There's no hiccups, so they've had a nice, solid, long, slow release grounding from when they're like 3 or 4 or whatever.
And I'm seeing it in a few, in people around me. And what I mean by this method is that you start day one and you spend a little bit of time really getting a comfortable bow hold, and the teacher's there to guide it, so you never have a bad habit creep in with your bow hold.
Yep.
Same thing with the left hand, slowly developing the rounded fingers and the fourth finger, and then slowly working on shifting and all this from the day one. And every time it's just, like you said, a slow release. And that you do these things, that you start on learning 1 octave scale, then you progress to 3 and 4 octave, and then the repertoire slowly gets harder and harder.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
And the technique's built. But here's the thing. That is the gold standard utopian thing that people don't realize. It can't happen for everyone.
That's right. It can't happen for everyone. Yep.
Because if you have that, first of all, you've got to have the right teacher from day one.
Yep.
And you've got to have a student that gets it from day one. And if we're talking a 3 or 4-year-old, how many 3 or 4-year-olds that are out there that are looking 10, 20 years from that age, going, I can one day play the triconcerto if I start doing this slow stuff from day one? Is there going to be any enjoyment? Are they going to keep motivated?
That's the different. I think we can talk about that in a separate issue, because that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the difference between the kids who don't have any holes in their technique and who just dutifully copied whatever they were told to do, and then they get to this really good level.
Multifaceted.
Right.
It is a multifaceted issue.
So those kids, those kids are fine. It's almost like that nothing can stop them from being okay. Except a nervous breakdown because they started too young and they just want to give it all up and become a bartender. But there's those kids. Then there are the kids or, students, individuals who didn't get that slow release learning when they were young. So what does that mean? Does that mean people who start later have no chance? No, it actually doesn't mean that. But it means that what you're saying, the old method of the 10,000 hour mentality and the particular studies and then the slow progression, it can't work. It can't work. If you're a university student who has holes in your technique, but you're still expected to play all this incredibly hard repertoire or tech exams or whatever.
I just want to pause there though.
Yep.
You say there's holes in the technique. That's a terminology I like because it works really well. So when you've got students, when you've got students that want to then go, I want to be at university, and say they get in, right?
Yep.
But they've got holes in their technique. It's almost like you can't, I don't want to say blame, but how they were, how they got to that point, because it's too grey area and nuanced to say that they maybe didn't take it seriously for a long time. Maybe it was just a habit. Maybe they weren't forced by parents. Maybe they did have a bad teacher or something like that. But the point is that music education from an early age and violin learning from an early age, maybe it wasn't that gold standard. So by the time they got to university, obviously good enough to get in, there's holes.
Yeah,
so
well, Yeah, so what you're saying is there are many reasons that people have holes in their technique.
But some of them, and the point I'm making, some of them are not bad. Some of them, does that make sense?
Some of them are not bad.
Some of the reasons why there's holes in technique.
Oh, yeah. But, okay, my point is it doesn't matter why there's holes in their technique. For the purposes of this conversation, some people have holes in their technique by the time they get to university level, and they shouldn't, but they do, and some people don't. So you've got people who can already play the violin, playing scales really well and playing studies really well. So my point is they're doing all of that as if if they're already a gymnast and they've just got their warm-up routine, which just helps them. But
we've got the pre-universities. Here's where we're going to go with this discussion. We've got the pre-university years with students unequal in their learning.
Yeah, basically.
Not a good or bad thing.
For whatever reason, yeah.
For whatever reason. By the time they get to university, then it becomes the try and get everybody to be playing the same thing, assuming everybody's at the same level, putting on the techniques like the 10 steps to get better on all of those students, but it's falling on different levels because the kids are at different levels.
Yeah, that's right.
One of my biggest grievances I have with university is when you have to do these tech exams.
Yeah.
Because in theory, this tech work is good. Of course, it's good. Being able to do scales, again, good. Being examined on them, brings me back to Amy B. Fine, yes, fine, you win, fine, good. But when it's 100% of your grade for about a 15-minute exam and all you're working on in the semester is this, Flesch scales, Galamian scales, whatever it is, studies for 3 months
Yeah.
and maybe a showpiece or two.
Yep.
And then you get graded on it. Now, if you're that student that's come in with theoretically no holes in their technique, you can already do it. You might be a bit bored, but you can do the exam and fine. But if you've come in and you've got holes in your technique, you've got to hope that you get a teacher that can work with you through that, but then you're going to still get graded on this stuff. So
Yeah, it's so traumatic, actually. And what's the traumatic part of it is that it's so heavily weighted. A 15-minute exam, that's often cut short, actually. A 15-minute exam is so heavily weighted.
100% of your grade.
Yeah, and I guess that's okay by itself, but there are no other performance exams in that 6 months. Am I right in thinking that?
Well, I've been to 2 different universities, and at one of them there was a mid-semester tech exam. The other one, it was only a tech exam. So nothing else in the semester.
Yeah, and so I think that the heavily weighted tech exam situation is a little bit of a problem, because I can see that students are basically putting everything else aside. Everything else aside for 6 months to do a 15-minute exam. And that's their only performance opportunity, which isn't, maybe it's not 100% true. Like, are you doing chamber? Are you doing orchestra? Are you doing any outside performances?
When it comes to the solo subject of your performance subject,
Yep.
yes, nothing else.
Yeah, okay. So, all right. So
your violin exam that semester is a tech exam.
And look, in the old days, I'll say old days, quote unquote, the people getting let in to the music schools, which were not the universities, all the music schools were separate from the universities. So that's a big difference, okay? That is a big difference. All the kids that were letting, in my sister's day, university was free, which meant that only the absolute best students got in, because the playing field was level. Anyone could get in because it was free. So you didn't have to be rich to get in. You didn't have to commit to HECS debt or anything like that. When I went to university, HECS had just come in. So it was still seemed free because you pay back HECS later. And then when you went to university was where you go for your music degree, not a separate music school. So all of those things, maybe this is for a different topic, but this affects the way music is taught. When I was there, you got chamber coaching every week, you and a pianist. So your instrument and a pianist every week. That was part of your course. Every week for, 2 years or something. Chamber, it was that plus you could do a chamber group and get assessed on that as well. Oral history, writing techniques, you call it, what do you guys call it?
We've got
music language.
But
right.
Your theory.
Yeah. So only the students who did it in high school to a really high level and got a really great academic mark at school could get in. So you weren't just getting in on the basis of your playing. You had to also have a background in a good, solid academic music education, which informs the way you play music. So there's not only holes in technique that we're talking about, there's also the great players who get into university now. They've got holes in their academic side.
Yeah, you sidestepped it a bit.
Sorry.
No, I mean...
That's what happens on Splitting Hairs.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. But I just want to go back to...
Yep, sure.
Because it's all about students and how we're practicing, right?
Yeah.
So if you get to this university level and you're doing a tech exam, if you're coming in, and I said before, right, you're focusing on the page and not your body.
Yeah.
So if you're focusing on getting this, like the scales in sequence with a metronome on, and you're trying to play 32 notes in a bow or whatever it is of a scale.
Yeah.
And you're working all semester on that, if you're not focusing on why you can't do that because of your body, it's a problem. So you're still focusing on the page. And then it comes down to the teachers that you get, really, in my opinion, should have a responsibility to go, your exam this semester is this tech exam. So I'm going to help you with, if you've got tension in any of your arms or your neck or your back, your shoulders, and being diligent with working on the scales, and not just the scales, but you have to do double stops, all the arpeggios, dominant, diminished, and you learn all this tech work like it's a recital. So you're practicing it like it's a recital because then that's how you have to perform it. You have to perform it and get it right in one go.
Which is really weird because you never ever have to do that in reality. You're never going to play a recital of tech work. I mean, you might play a recital with some Paganini and some Isai and some, Brahms in it, which has scales and so on. But yeah, you're never going to present this. Look, in all fairness, I think there has to be tech exams. I think kids can't avoid that. You just have to be able to do it. But if you avoid it when you're younger because it's hard, then you will get to university and you will get let in, but you will have to dedicate this 6 months of grueling, agonizing work.
So, yeah, on paper, being able to pass your tech exam with a good mark and do all the work is admirable and it makes sense. Students should know how to play scales. I'm not dissing scales. I'm just getting annoyed with seeing people think that putting on the metronome and practicing a chapter of Carl Flesch every day is going to make them better if they're not addressing their body. And if we've got courses structured around that and not focusing on the body itself, it's not gonna work. You're gonna get tired. You're gonna get burnt out. And it comes back down to really having teachers that help and guide you. If you are that student that comes with holes in their technique and you can't play scales properly in that regards.
Yeah, definitely. So look, I guess you're right. We shouldn't complain about unis or whatever. We can complain that some people maybe get in and they shouldn't, and that's very stressful for them. And then all that responsibility falls to the teacher because it's like, oh my God, this kid has never done thirds. How can this be? How can this kid get into university? But then who do you blame? You blame the university for letting these people in, or do you blame the kid for going for a tertiary performance music course and you can't play thirds? What sort of are we going to talk a little bit about the students who are a bit deluded here as well? Like if you can't play C major thirds and you're going for a Bachelor of Music, I mean, how do you think that's going to work out for you? And whose fault is that if you struggle when you get to uni?
It's an interesting thing. The first thing I thought of was, are we putting tech work, scales, arpeggios, playing with a metronome above chamber and playing with people? Because it's two sides of a coin.
Well, you said something really interesting the other day, and that is tech shouldn't be a separate issue from music. And that's what I think this exam does.
I'm going to call this out a little bit, but if you don't receive a certain mark on this tech exam, you're not eligible to play in chamber. So you have to spend the time getting better at the tech stuff. At a loss for playing with other people and,
whereas playing in chamber would actually help everything else in your technique.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's right. Well, we should just start our own music school, shouldn't we?
Yes, we should.
And I believe it should be like National Music Camp, because National Music Camp in this country is really great because you've got everything. You've even got solo if you want it, I mean, less so, but if you want to do a duo for chamber music, that's practically solo. And you're getting up in front of hundreds of kids and heaps of tutors. And, and there's no commentary. This is another really, really big problem in the university system, is that you're supposed to get up and be judged by your peers. Your peers are supposed to sit there and go, yeah, I really like the way you play that, but, it's maybe a little bit unrhythmical. It's like, you don't think that people getting up playing in front of peers, they're going to know that they weren't perfect? Like, what is the sense of your peers criticising you? I think there should be performance class, but I don't think anyone but the teacher, the lecturer, should have any right to say anything whatsoever. Nothing.
Yeah. I mean, I've been, again, to universities and it was different. Some of them were like, can we get feedback from the students in the room? And some of it was, no, only the teacher taking that class gives the feedback.
Yeah.
Mind you, you get up there in front of your peers and you think everyone's judging me. And I'm sorry, everyone's sitting there going, I'm bored, I want to go home. It's 4 p.m.
Yeah. Basically.
Trust me.
Yeah.
at least 85 of the class.
I had this friend, she was so hilarious. I won't say her name, but anyway, she basically bullied me into being in a string quartet with her. And that was great fun because she was just this awesome person. And she's a lawyer now. And wouldn't it be funny if she was actually listening? Anyway, I played some...
Hi, friend.
Yeah, I played some Bach.
Like this video.
Yeah, right. I played some Bach in concert class, and she was the first one to come running up to me afterwards, and she goes, "You know what? I think it could have been better. I think you should have done this. I think you could have done that." She's like really critical. But I know her so well. I knew her so well. I knew that she was trying to be really, really helpful. But
I had friends with that. We'd be in the practice room and play for each other, and it was, "What do you think?" And it was a lot of times, "What do you think of my playing?" And it was, "Let's get better," and stuff,
Yeah, I find it really hard to take that criticism, not because I think I'm great, but because I know, I'm working on it. I know. Don't you think I know what just came out? It was crap. And I don't want other people to tell me what I already know. Like
that sounds really like my
irritating.
lesson sometimes,
I
Sarah.
know. That's why you get in such a bad mood because you're just like, "Oh, I know that didn't work out." So, apologies in public for making you feel annoyed in your lesson, but...
Oh, we'll get that. But one of the points I wanted to say was that there's this... So going back to the perception of modern day students and how they think they need to practice, which is closing the practice room door. You're in there for 5, hours minimum. I've been that person. It did work out for me, but, at what cost when I think of everything else around it? And you think, okay, I need to work on myself, but myself alone in a practice room doing scales and then Stradiak and then Dunas and then reading that book by Galamian and then, practicing these concertos in a certain order. Why don't you just grab your friend who plays piano and go pick a really easy piece of music and work on some chamber? Or your friend who plays cello and viola or something and go put a quartet together. Even if you're just sort of like, it's two sides of it. Yes, you need to do the individual practice by yourself, but properly, and that's nuanced to every student because I don't know what your technique's like. But don't think it has to be a certain structure. You have to, And then the other side is that grab your friends and go and play music together, and it'll
Definitely.
round you out as a student.
And so, can you describe the old way that you did and now the new way, if you feel there's a big difference in the positive?
Yeah, okay. I was that person. I'd get to the practice room at 8:30 in the morning and I'd be there until lunchtime and then I'd come back in the afternoon. I did work on scales, but only for the purpose of that tech exam.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would, flick through. I did a lot of Kreutzer. So I did more studies than anything else. And I'm not saying they're not valued. They did work, but it's just, hear me out, right?
I love studies.
And then if I was doing an exam, I'd work on that repertoire, which was sonatas or some solo Izai or Paganini or things like that, or concertos. But then that was it every day. But I think I look back now and it's like, okay, I did have the wrong mindset. I might have been doing well, but I did get the RSI. I did burn out. I did get really tired. And I know that I wasn't focusing on my body so much because when it comes to the moment where, I've learnt this piece, why am I now getting up in front of people, where it be my friend, my teacher, the recital itself, and where's all this tension come into my body that wasn't there in the practice room? Because I was practicing too technically and not thinking about, thinking on the page and not thinking of my body the whole time, and then not practicing the performance side of playing. Because there's two ways of learning something, in my opinion. There's the I'm figuring it out on the page, I'm learning, what's my finger pattern, what's my bowing pattern, that's all good. And then there's, as you say, learn a bar, turn away, think of it, the body, and then learning it from memory at the same time. And I was neglecting that second half for a long time.
Because you thought there was an order. You had to get all the scales and the tech right before you could progress to the music side.
Yeah, something like that. And then nowadays, I had this bit of a breakthrough a couple of years ago, which was, I've always been able to learn things from memory, but neglected that technique for a while. So I picked that back up, which was spend a little bit longer on a piece. really practicing a lot more for memory. So like you say, but it'd be maybe a phrase or two, and wholeheartedly thinking of my body. And I practiced Vinyasky's fourth caprice. Yeah, okay. And that one was probably the last piece I did where I was practicing sort of tension within it, but I couldn't get it to, it can't be slow. It cannot be slow. But when I started practicing, really going, I'm thinking of my bow arm, dropping that weight, and then just going for the tempo, I'd got it because I was really relaxed. So I started thinking body, 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 body the whole time.
It's amazing, isn't it? And it's amazing how many people forget that your body is involved in playing this music.
So the other side is, well, more to it, sorry, is rather than, so if it's not already obvious by now, I was that student that sort of had holes in their technique. I used to think, yes, I must go through flesh scales. I must do that. I must. And I got bored every time. I got bored. And therefore, even if I wasn't bored, I just couldn't focus on it and do it properly and gain what you theoretically should gain from doing those chapters. So to your recommendation, I started doing road studies now that I can do them pretty well. And I play all kinds of keys through those studies and they modulate. When have I ever sat down to practice E flat minor, or whatever it is? But, so yes, I practice scales now in different keys that really aren't as common as G major and A major.
Yeah.
But through my studies, and we had a little challenge earlier in the year, which was to observe my practice in this lesson time. From the second I learn a piece, thinking of the bow and my bow changes to work on bow control and practicing in these ridiculous keys to practice like modulation and stuff like that through that as well. So I changed how long I practice for, and I really condensed it down to practicing properly, thinking of my body, thinking of like certain types of technique from the start of learning. One of that is like for memory and stuff.
Yep.
And I mean, I'm still working on a lot of things that I was working on at the beginning of the year. So I don't do as much Stradiak. I had to put down Kreutzer because they were like my university years studies.
Yeah.
It was just like, I can't do them anymore.
But you've got what you needed out of them, I'm sure. I'm sure you don't need them anymore unless it's just like a flick through and, okay, I better practice a bit of octave stuff. I'm just going to do 5 minutes on an octave one. Like you just use it like that, dip in.
So my practice has changed, but it's the perception around it that's changed.
Yeah. And besides all of this that you're talking about, the goal is to be useful, the goal is to be flexible, the goal is to be professional. And all professional is playing music that you don't feel like most of the time to quite a high level for money. And that is a very impersonal way of looking at it. So often with this stressful way of practicing that people are practicing, there's a lot of pressure they put on themselves. It's very emotional. It's very negative emotion. It's full of failure in their minds. And that's not professional at all. That's actually very amateurish to think that emotion has anything to do with you becoming a better violinist, right? So I think we also need to change our attitudes towards our practice in terms of, I've got a job to do, I've got notes to learn, and this is going to be less of an emotional roller coaster now. There are solutions. I'm going to practice well. I'm not going to just beat myself up in a sort of masochistic way.
The other side of it is, that you're right, is not overreaching when you practice. So really playing, and I mean, I do criticize the standard repertoire a little bit when people think it's the only thing, but really sticking to repertoire that fits within your technical level.
Oh, you mean overreaching in terms of a piece that's too hard, maybe? Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Like, I see that in some people, and I've done it myself. So I'm not. I've done it. So that's how I really know it. It's just you're worthwhile just something slightly easier and absolutely nailing it. As the Schumann what does he say? Those points. He said play some easier repertoire and but much better, basically.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I overreached so much. Oh, wow. I did, what did I do? Sanson 3 when I was in year 11 or something.
Boring concerto.
Oh, it's not, how dare you? That's one of my most beloved favourite pieces. But
How
because
come you
I
never
learned
recommended it to some people? When I always ask you about repertoire, you rarely mention people should do
because
that
it's
one.
really hard. But maybe I think it's really hard because I did it too early. So, for example, I'm now making students play Tchaikovsky because that wasn't one from my childhood. I didn't try and play that when I was too young or anything. Brahms was another one that I was in, I don't know, 4th year or something, and I just played Sibelius for my 3rd year concerto exam, because back in the day, everyone got to play a full concerto to a panel with a pianist, and that was one of your performance requirements. Anyway, played Sibelius. The teachers came running down to the front of the stage. Oh, wonderful, that was so great. You should do Brahms next. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll do Brahms next. So I get the music, I start learning Brahms, and I'd got through to the 3rd round of Young Performance Award with Sibelius, right? So I'm like, yeah, great. Did well with that. I'll do Brahms. I didn't even pass the 1st round of ABC Young Performance Award with the Brahms. It was just so bad. It was so traumatic and bad, and I never got it any better. And
I feel like if you look at the arc of what Brahms wrote and how hard of the stuff he wrote, it was just all fueling towards a violin concerto.
Yeah.
That just nobody could premiere it. Like, it was just, and it was Huberman that premiered it back in the day, and he was some freak prodigy, right? Mm-hmm. But it's just that's a beast. That piece is actually a beast. I look at the first page or two and I'm just like, no, I'm fine. I don't want to do that now.
Yeah, and I had to perform the whole thing for one of the rounds. Maybe it was the 2nd round. I don't know. I think the 1st round was a recital round and the 2nd round was the full concerto. Then the 3rd round was like a bit of the concerto with an orchestra, and then the finals were the finals. So it must have been the 2nd round. Oh yeah, that's what made it worse. I just breezed it in, past the 1st round, and then concerto round is like, oh, actually, I totally bombed out on that one. I kept going, and I had it from memory. I kept going, but it was just agonizingly awful. And I mean, I was a real trooper. I mean, I still am a trooper. I'll just keep going. I'm not going to have a nervous breakdown and walk off the stage. I just keep smashing it out. But but when it's bad, I feel bad. I feel tense. I feel stressed. It's not about music. It's just about hanging on and surviving. And I'm sure most of the people who listen to this who are performing musicians have felt like that at some point, if not all the time. And it comes from our attitude. And as you said, bringing our body into the whole experience from the beginning.
In an ideal world, kids would take the Alexander technique at the same time at university. I got to do one semester of it at uni, and then that class just disappeared, and I was just, it is incredibly vital. It changes the way you think, okay? It changes the way you think about how you use your body. I always described it, and now if anybody's a Alexander technique, teacher or whatever, expert, just hear me out. I've always viewed it this way, right? Physiotherapy is how to fix the problem you've already got in your body, but Alexander technique is preventative.
Yeah.
Using your body correctly from the start. We think women always cross their legs. Crossing your legs is actually not good for you. Just as an example. So I remember only recently, I've played that the standard repertoire and been thinking more on the page, and I really was, my focus was in a good place of I want to play in tune, I want to play in time, I want to make a nice sound. That's all good stuff to be trying to achieve. I was falling short a lot of the time because I wasn't coming back to my body and dealing with, I didn't even notice I had tension in my arm because I wasn't focusing on, I can't move my arm properly because there's tension. Relax. I was still thinking on the page. But recently I would pick up some of the pieces that I used to do that I struggled with back then, but because I've changed with how I now approach a piece, every single thing that I once struggled with, it's all there.
You mean it's still there?
No, sorry. When I say it's all there is I can play it. like getting all the notes out, free, relaxed, good sound. That's what I mean by everything on the page. Yeah.
Excellent.
So, but that's because, yeah, hopefully I've improved since I was at university, but the way I now look at something like the opening of Brookenschroeder, you try and get those 7 tuplet notes, whatever, in whatever, and I'm thinking first note and focusing on my bow and letting the bow direct it, and then the left hand is just going along with it rather than thinking about left hand. It's what you always talk about in my lessons or in general. The bow destroys things because my perception's always in my left hand. It's not in tune or whatever it is, and you go relax in your bow arm, let the bow direct it, and then sure enough, the left hand will just follow the right hand in that sense, and it's all there.
So look, on that topic, that's a really interesting thing to talk about is the approach in terms of this. You've just said, I tried to play in tune, in time, and with a good sound. Whereas actually you have just described the most boring musician on earth. So you've got someone who plays in time, i.e. metronomically. That is someone who absolutely misses the point of all the different languages, of all the different nationalities of music that we're supposed to play. So fail. Already in time, fail. In tune. What do you mean in tune? Are you playing Bach or are you playing Wieniawski? Right. So your F sharp in Bach is going to be a different F sharp in Wieniawski. So in tune, fail. Are you adjusting? You're landing on a bad note and adjusting it? You're practicing intonation? No, fail. Good sound. This is an interesting one because if you're practicing a good sound, quote unquote, good sound, why do you always need a good sound? Sometimes you need an angry sound. Sometimes you need a sad sound.
Now,
listen, I'm not finished. I'm talking now. If you have a good sound all the time, then you're communicating possibly 20% of what the music is requiring of you. So good sound, fail. Bow. Is your bow destroying all the work that your left hand is trying to do in your pursuit of 3 hours of technical work a day? Because I bet you think technical work is in the left hand. So as you said, is the bow destroying all that wonderful work that my left hand is trying to do? So from that point of view, are you blaming the right side, the correct side? Is it the right hand or is it the left hand?
That's the perception that, again, the students that we're sort of talking about have. I'm one of them. I think I still hold on to that bad narrative a little bit.
So do I. I don't think that because I tell it to you in lessons every week that I'm not falling under that spell as well. Don't think that I'm not a victim of it too.
So I think people put into... I mean, I have a list right in front of me that's come from my friend. It's come from his teacher of the order of how you should learn music. Oh my gosh, it's just come to me. I'm going to read it out.
Okay, great.
I've got to move stuff off my pinboard.
Look, if I had a list in front of me, you would accuse me of cheating.
All right, so just come to me because it's in front of me. I've ignored it my whole life, but here it is. Okay, so point number 1. And by the way, this is specifically in order of how a student should learn.
Okay.
And it's come from, I won't say who because I really, really, really can't, but it's come from a teacher that obviously is teaching this way. 1, intonation and rhythm. 2, phrase planning. 3, nuance. 4, vibrato. 5, integration of left and right hand.
Oh, so, well, look, that sounds reasonable at first. At a glance, that sounds, okay, that makes sense.
It's also somewhat correct, but again, it comes to...
It's somewhat correct. You're right. It's somewhat correct. It's theoretically correct. But if you're waiting till step 5 to bring in vibrato or whatever...
4 or whatever.
Okay, then that's an interesting idea because what if the vibrato is generating the sound? Like what if the vibrato is the thing that has to start before something else happens? So yeah, that's kind of interesting and I'm not going to diss it completely and maybe that's a good thing for kids like those kids who learn well from the beginning.
But
they have time.
It's an example of a list of things that you want to place on all
everyone.
Students.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Got it.
That will work for people when they're at that level for that to work.
Agreed.
So if you're a student that comes into uni, you're really excited, great. You're going to hate it in a year. Whatever. I don't care. Anyway, you have holes in your technique. It's overwhelming. And then you just got to hope you get the right teacher that gets you.
You know, those lists, lately I've been thinking I should compile a list like this because I do find that I'm repeating certain things.
I'll read it to you. I'll be back.
Well, Well, Annabelle's gone.
You already gave me a list.
Well, yeah, but I don't think it's complete. I think it's just the ramblings of a mad person.
Yeah, so fairly complete. It's in my excerpt book. Of all the excerpts that it's to be written next to, it's next to Don 1.
I've got a new one, by the way.
Okay, well, let me read your list.
Okay, you go first.
Heavy bow, light fingers.
Oh, I love that one. I forgot that one. Okay, good.
Slow bow. If you can't relax in time, take the time to relax.
Classic.
First finger problem number 1. If you can't play anything, fire the first finger. Chromatic intonation. High third fingers. And slow right, fast left.
Slow right, fast left is a good one. I've got a new one.
Yeah, what is it?
Don't go until you know. Okay, it does sound like the ramblings of a mad person, but don't go until you know is simply don't play one note when you need to play 3 notes fast. Just get the 3 notes ready and then play the 3 notes. Da-da-da.
Yeah, so I think what we're really talking about is rather than the list that says studies, scales, concerto, Bach, intonation, then rhythm, then vibrato, it's rewording all of it. Can we change our perspective?
Yeah, so you need a list of more generalized questions like first finger question mark. So that for those who don't know what we're talking about when we say first finger, left first finger, if you're crushing that first finger down, all the other fingers are really stiff. So all these generalized. I might compile this list one day, list of golden gems for violinists, and I might publish it on one of these on this in the description. I might, if you're extremely lucky. But then I'd have to do some work in my spare time and think. Anyway, look, that's fine. You got any more gripes? Because I think we've pretty much covered the psychological damage that people can get if they stick to a list, as you've said.
Yeah,
change your perspective.
They've got 2 last things. One is one of the stupidest things that comes about from yes, university, but just sort of music learning in general, is if you have to learn something, you have to, not because you don't want to, you have to learn something like an excerpt for an audition.
Yep.
Like with orchestras and stuff.
Yep.
And you're not at that level to play that excerpt. So you're learning, your technique is being learnt through this excerpt. And the best example I've got is Don 1.
Yeah.
Because I've had that excerpt on my university list since day one of, like, I've done two different universities since that first university, and it's on the list. You have to do it. If you want to audition, you have to do it. And if you're holes in the technique or whatever, you struggle with it, by the time you want to learn it properly, because that is a very, very real world audition excerpt, like no one, it just is.
Yeah.
You have to go back. Like, I recommend people don't go back and do repertoire they've struggled with.
I agree with that. Except when you talk about excerpts, you have to come back to them again and again and again.
So I've had to come back to Don 1 and just
relearn it.
Yep. And it takes double the amount of time.
Well, that's your gripe, and that's a real gripe, and that's something that people have to deal with. But what you're saying is, don't go back to a piece that you really, really struggled with.
Yeah, so the sucky thing is when you have to.
When you have to,
because you want to, you have to. Because it's been on the list since there. When students come to university, they can't play properly, or, holes in their technique, or however you want to put it.
Or that it's a really difficult excerpt, actually. It's difficult for grown-ups and professionals, and it's difficult when you look at the roster and you see Don Juan's coming again, and it's like, oh, God, and everyone knows the first page, but then what about the rest of it? It's actually really difficult.
Soon, we're doing a Don Juan video as soon as we're back in person. That's what I'm busy learning. The rest of it. I learned the first page. Great, that's the excerpt. Have you looked at page 3 or page 6?
Yeah, I know.
They are so amazingly fun, but it's like, right, keys, subdivide, keys, subdivide.
Yeah, exactly. Oh.
So the last thing I think we can point to is, okay, so I've got this gripe over the way students think they should practice. They think they need to do all these things and document it and put on Instagram, all right? Awesome. What can students do now, like, to change this?
Students should get off social media. Students should limit their social media because social media is destroying the very fabric of this society. Welcome to our YouTube channels.
Speaking of, like, share, and subscribe. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. That's your grievance, and we're not going there. But it's just sort of like, it took me, and I can't be all the whole what if it was this, whatever. But it did take me time to realize I've been thinking badly about how I should practice. Yeah. Neglecting things that I didn't think were as important as they are.
Like what? What did you think wasn't important but it was? What is the main thing that you think is important now and you didn't then?
Twofold. Practicing the performing of things.
Great.
I would do all the work to learn it. And you've been there with me in those lessons where I've gone, you know that I know this piece. Yep. I know that I know this piece. Yep. Why in that second I go to perform it is anxiety or tension getting in the way when I've learned this whole concerto and I'm playing it for memory in front of you, which I ended up performing. And the answer to that was that I hadn't from the very start addressed the tension issues from the second I started learning it.
Yeah, and then one note to the next, the first note to the second note. If that's already got tension in it, you're going to spend years unbuilding that tension.
So that was that, and that was a real, I'm a very emotional person. That was a real struggle for me to have to do all this. Well, I did all this work and then realize I'd done it wrong from the start. I can play. I've learnt all the Four Seasons and the entire Bruch Concerto, Mendelssohn, all of those pieces, and sometimes it's just there's been moments where it's just not worked out. The second one was more emphasis on playing with people.
Great. More emphasis on get out of that practice room and play some duets with someone. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Totally great advice. Great advice from someone who has suffered and someone who is now no longer suffering and on the path of the enlightened student. That's you.
Yeah, I mean it. I had my lesson just before. I'll practice a little bit later today. I won't do scales. I'm going to go do my road study.
Oh, the road studies are so beautiful. They're absolutely beautiful pieces of mini music. They're just divine. I
just wish, so my hope is, when I meet first years, I say, my gosh, stick to the standard repertoire and do things easier than you think they are. You may really, really want to play Mendelssohn Concerto. I guarantee you it's too hard. It is so much more harder than people think it is.
Yeah.
Don't even do Bruch. Bruch should be second year. You should do Mozart G major or, spend more time in the classical rep and the classical concertos and Baroque repertoire outside of solo Bach, and go find other Baroque music, Leclerc or something.
Yeah.
And broaden the horizons on earlier music, because I've always said Mozart is a lot harder than people think it is, and it will identify any tension that you have in your body.
Yeah.
So that's another one.
Yeah, cool.
I think I've vented enough. We might do a part 2 on this if I have more to.
If you get annoyed again, we can part 2 this one up. Yeah, awesome. That was great. Well, I believe I learnt a lot today, Annabelle. Thanks.
Oh, that's nice. Okay. Okay, we're done. Great. But what I should say is we are in the process of launching the audio only onto iTunes, Spotify. They'll all come up. So if you're listening to it on those platforms, all of our other content is on YouTube. We don't just do the audio podcast. We have Sarah's Slash and Burns, which I have no say over, as annoying.
She doesn't like them at all.
That's your thing for whatever. And then when we're back in person, there'll be more video, more videos. We're gonna film this Don Juan, and there's a Bach challenge video coming, and eventually there'll be an Izai challenge video coming. So if you only listen to the audio podcast on those platforms, you have to go over to our YouTube stuff to see all the other stuff that we have out.
And as we said, like, subscribe, and please share.
Yeah. We done?
We're done.
All right, good. Bye.
Okay, bye.